Anyway, Genji. I I don't think this is all too controversial. I will say this is actually one where I might be being too charitable, but I can't really know. Genji is one of the few characters that I am not sure if I can really play them to a good standard. I say I'm not sure rather than I can't, because recently I've had a lot of pop-off gains on Genji, but they're not consistent. It feels like sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't, and I haven't really quite picked up on why. A lot of the time, it just feels like when I pop off, it just feels like my team is actually here and actually helping me. And when I don't, it's like, well, my team is not here and not helping me. But it's like, while that sounds like an obvious explanation, a lot of the time there's more to it than that, and yet that's all I can pick up on so far as a common denominator when I've been playing Genji. So I'm not entirely sure if I've clicked with Genji yet, or if I've just had some lucky games recently and I don't realize that I really can't actually deal with a game where things get rough for Genji yet, and that I shouldn't really say that I can play him yet. So I'm in a weird mid spot with Genji. Either way, because of that, I might be being a bit too charitable here, but the main reason I put Genji this high is very similar to Doomfist. It doesn't quite have as much movement tech as Doomfist, so I wouldn't say he's quite as difficult, but to make up for it, the mechanical skill in playing Genji is through the fucking roof, which not to say it's not high for Doomfist as well, but I'd say it's even higher for Genji. Being able to track onto headshots with triple shurikens to the head, like at close range, on fast-moving targets is ridiculously difficult, and I don't know how people do it. Seriously, I'm not gonna lie, I actually have never watched Necros before until recently. I'd heard of him, I just never watched him, and I got recommended a video of his recently, and holy shit, it was actually terrifying watching the way he aims. He's an actual fucking machine, and it's terrifying to think that's how Genji's fucking play. Like, I can't conceive of that level of gameplay. So, yeah. I think that it's pretty fair to say Genji's high up. I would get into all the reasons why, but it's kind of similar to Doomfist. Just the whole, you have to think like a tank because you have to think about making space and escape routes and all that, but you have to deal with the fact that you're fragile and like a tank. But as I say, I must admit, Genji is a character I'm not super experienced or knowledgeable on, so if there are people who would actually argue he's lower, I'm willing to hear out your arguments. Hanzo. Oh boy. Yeah, I'm gonna say it. Listen, I know, again, if we're talking top skill levels, obviously predicting movements, blah blah blah, but come on, your average Hanzo spams arrows in doorways and it works. Let's be real. And even when you talk about the crazy high skill Hanzos that can actually land long shot arrow headshots that are actually skill based and not look based, even if you talk about that, they've mastered one skill: shooting a projectile effectively. And don't get me wrong, that's a difficult skill. But it's one skill. I don't think Hanzo has any particularly in-depth positioning to him. I don't think he has any particularly in-depth strategy to him. I think it's mostly just aim skill. And, well, he does have that. I don't know. Okay, right, you know what? I'm being a little bit harsh here. I really don't like Hanzo. He's one of the few characters... I say I can't play him. I say that because I feel like I'm inconsistent with Hanzo, similar to Genji, where I've still had plenty of games where I popped off on Hanzo, but it's not every game. Well, obviously it's never every game, but you know what I mean? Like, it's still a good half of the time that I do terrible on Hanzo and half the time I do amazing, and it feels like there's not much of a middle ground, which probably means that half the time I'm getting lucky and half the time I'm not. I'm kind of convinced that while I've had a lot of games that go well on Hanzo, I don't have games that go well on Hanzo because I can aim on Hanzo super well. I have games that go well on Hanzo because I'm lucky as fuck. Because I just fire arrows into chokes and get free headshots and it works. So, again, I'll leave the door open if you're a Hanzo connoisseur. I'll hear out your arguments for why he deserves to be higher than this. Because, again, I admit I've got a bit of a bias against this character. I really fucking hate him. He's annoying as shit, and he should not be able to one-shot, and it's stupid that he deals the amount of damage he does. But, I think again, this is one of the few characters that I have as much to say about, so I'll just move on from that. Illari. How spicy do I want to be? Oh, you know what? I'm gonna be fucking spicy. I said it. Okay. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying Illari is no skill. However, I will stand by the stance that Illari does not take as much skill as Brig. I'll fucking do it. Okay, again, maybe this is my favour for brain characters over aim characters, but the thing with Illari is, the main thing that's supposed to be tough about her is that, oh, you have to land these hit-scan shots with your gun to do loads of damage. And don't get me wrong, you know, again, it takes aim. But we're talking about someone who basically takes the same level of aim skill as Cass does, and most people consider Cass a pretty easy character. So does Illari's healing make her more complicated? Well, not really. You hold right-click on people to heal them with your manual beam, and for your turret, you just put it on a spot where it's slightly difficult to shoot, but also relatively protected, and it auto-heals your team for you. The healing really isn't very high skill. And then there's Outburst, which is mostly just press a button, and you get away. You know, there really isn't a whole lot to Illari, in my opinion. Her mobility isn't particularly high skill compared to other supports. Her main weapon, while it is very aim-intensive, is aim-intensive in the most easy way possible. A hit scan that always shoots exactly where you point it, with no recoil to worry about, and no, like, travel time or arc. It just shoots where you point it, and that's it. Oh, okay, you know what? I'll measure up one, because I just realised her ult does take a lot of skill. There's a lot of thought that comes into when you use her ult, and obviously using the flight effectively and trying to land a headshot mid-flight. That is difficult. But I think other than that, yeah, I think I'm going to stick by this. I think you have to use a lot more of your brain to play Brig than you have to play Illari. And I will stand by that. I've played a decent amount of Illari. In fact, Illari is currently my highest win rate character. Woohoo! 65% win rate with Illari currently. But either way, I feel like I don't have that win rate because I'm cracked at Illari. I feel like I have that win rate because with Illari, you can mostly just kind of sit medium far back, just kind of click on heads as people pass you by, and just kind of, for the most part, just kind of rely on your turret to do all the healing, and then whenever your tank gets low, hold right click on them. There is some positioning in that because you have such a short range heal, you have to make sure you're always within enough distance to your tank that you can save them with your heal beam, but other than that, yeah, I really don't think Illari takes as much skill as most people make it out to be. Junker Queen. Oh, well, we're going in the other direction now. Whereas this is a character that I think a lot of people have the impression is very high skilled, that I disagree with. This is probably an opposite one, where I'm not sure if this is everyone's opinion, but I do see that there's a decent amount of people who seem to think Junker Queen is like a relatively easy or even brain-dead tank. I do not agree. I think Junker Queen is tough, man. Here's the thing. Junker Queen requires you to think about quite a lot. You essentially... I think a lot of people think Junker Queen is dumb because they look at bad Junker Queens and they see how bad they do and they're like, yep, typical Junker Queen. And it's like, all you do is shout and then spam shotgun and then axe people. You don't even have to aim. But when you actually look at how you play Junker Queen properly, it's not quite like that. A lot of the time you get close to the front lines and then find somewhere that you can camp or a corner you can hide around. And you basically just poke and you keep an eye on the enemies and you wait until you can catch someone who's either overextending so you can punish them and maybe go for a pick. Or if you don't get anyone that overextends or ends up out of position on the enemy team, then you can start throwing knives and hoping to land them so you can pull someone out of position. This is why I like to play Junker Queen on Dorado a lot, because while most people go to dive tanks like Winston or Doomfist on that map, I like going Junker Queen because while she can't get to the high ground easily, she does make it difficult for the people on the high ground to kill her, so long as you play relatively passive on her, which makes them want to kind of extend a bit further to get a better angle on you and shoot you if you're hiding behind something like the payload or whatever. And then once they overextend and get a little too close, it makes it a bit easier to land your knife throws and then pull them off the high ground and single them out. And then in a split second, the team has to decide whether they want to jump down and save the person that just got pulled off the high ground, or if they want to just leave him to die. And usually what ends up happening is that they either all leave them to die, or most of them leave them to die, but someone doesn't get the message and jumps down with them to try and help them out, and they both die. So in my experience, Junker Queen is amazing on Dorado. I think I actually haven't lost a game on Dorado with Junker Queen. I think every time I pick Junker Queen it goes well, because This strategy of essentially waiting for people to make the mistake first and then forcing them out of position with knife is extremely effective. Another thing that a lot of people don't get about Junker Queen is that, for the most part, obviously not always, you don't just like, oh, the fight's starting, shout, axe, go in, run in there. Because what happens? You shout, you run in with axe, and you probably do land your axe because you can run faster with your shout, but then your shout runs out, and you've got nothing but your knife, and you're inside the middle of the fray, with no abilities except knife, and unless you get enough kills in there with your knife and your shotgun that you can get out safely, you die then, unless someone bails you out. So instead, as I say, what you tend to do is start off a lot more passive, baiting like people to make mistakes, or pulling people out of position if no one makes a mistake, and then you either shout to chase someone once they're out of position, or if you don't need shout, you just run after them without shout, and only use shout to back out if suddenly you start getting in danger. So a lot of the time I use shout to disengage rather to engage. I only tend to use shout to engage if I know that I'll get a pick with it that's so absolutely vital that we will need it to win the game, or if getting that pick will mean that I'll no longer die for overextending because I've killed the thing that would have punished me for overextending. Those are the only two conditions where I tend to push in with shout. Usually you use it to disengage instead. Not to mention that Junker Queen, in my opinion, is a character who is insanely reliant on her ultimate. I actually think Junker Queen generally is one of the weakest tanks in the game in terms of flat power level if you're talking her normal kit. I think that really the only thing she has that's strong is speed, but even then, speed can be very volatile. Sometimes it's extremely valuable, and sometimes it's useless. And so, I think that Junker Queen's low survivability, and honestly, in my opinion, kind of low damage, at least in terms of burst, kind of makes her a little bit rough to play, but the main thing that compensates for that is that her ultimate is one of the strongest tank ultimates in the... No, I would say it. The strongest tank ultimate in the game. I think it's better than Flux. I think Rampage is the strongest tank ultimate in the game, and a contender for the strongest ultimate in the entire game, full stop. And I think that's the main thing that kind of pulls Queen out from being terrible. But the fact that her ultimate is that important means that using it, knowing when to use it, and making sure that there's no chance it's going to be cancelled when you do use it is extremely important to playing Junker Queen well. So yeah, I actually think there's a lot more to Junker Queen than people give her credit for. And I think I already made this clear, but in case I didn't, this is ordered within tiers. So I'd still say that Junker Queen is on the lower end of the demanding side, but she's still demanding. Junkrat. I'm so tempted to do this, man. I am so tempted, but I have to realize that while my gut feeling is that Junkrat is brain dead, in reality, he's probably not. I say that because Junkrat is, again, one of the few characters I can't play. When I actually sit down and play Junkrat, it goes amazingly when it's a game that Junkrat will obviously do well in, with claustrophobic corridors where you can just kind of spam and get free kills. But if it's ever a game where you actually have to put in some effort to make Junkrat work, I am awful at Junkrat, and he's the character in the game I have the most deaths per 10 minutes on. It's somewhere around 9.5, which I'm honestly a little bit embarrassed about, but I suppose I only have like 2 hours on Junkrat. The main thing is I'm just very used to playing characters that are either tanky or have high mobility, and I'm not used to a character that doesn't have either. The only way you can make Junkrat have high mobility is if you become an absolute connoisseur with his mines and self-launching yourself around, which I am certainly not. It doesn't come naturally to me, and so I find them a bit clunky to use, and I'm not really very good at getting around with Junkrat. The only thing that I found myself to be good at with Junkrat is using Riptire, and obviously that isn't exactly the hardest thing in the world. So either way, the reason why I'm putting him here is because I recognize that to actually play, like, insane top-level Junkrat, in fairness, actually takes quite a lot of skill. You actually have to be consistent with the direction you launch yourself with your mines and be very good with managing your cooldowns, and you have to be very, very sure that every single time you go to burst kill someone, you always land direct hits. You can't just spam once you get to that kind of high level of play with Junkrat and get away with it. That being said, let's be real, that's not most Junkrats. Most Junkrats get to spam down main and just get free kills randomly from bombs bouncing off of walls and hitting people 3 miles away they couldn't even see. And even when you get to those super high skill Junkrats, it's certainly a massive jump in skill, much more than you'd expect from a Junkrat, but I'd still argue that they aren't necessarily more high skill than most of the characters that are popular at high level play, so, you know. Kiriko. Oh god, wait, is this... No! Oh shit. You know, I'm still going to do this ranking, but god damn it. I was kind of hoping this wouldn't be the first one to go into this tier, because, god God damn it, this is probably the spiciest take in this video for me. I swear she's not alone here. Brain dead. I said it. I said it. Okay, let me explain myself. So, as you know, I play a lot of support, and I play all supports. And so, it's not that I haven't played Kiriko. I've played my fair share of Kiriko, and I don't want to play her anymore. I have already made an entire video. Oh, actually, maybe I've not put it... I just realized I'm going to make it in future. I don't think it's going to be uploaded when I upload this video. Okay, I am making an entire video explaining all my problems with Kiriko, so for the sake of not being redundant, I'm not going to make this very long. For the most part, though, the cliff notes of it is that only at close range is landing kunais mostly skill. At longer ranges, it's mostly luck, and even at close range, you can sometimes just spam kunais at head high and land shots, even if you're not really aiming for the person, you're just sort of generally firing kunais at head high and hoping some of them connect. I think kunais are the only part about Kiriko that take any skill, considering her healing is like self-aims, considering you never really have to do difficult Suzu throws with like Kiriko in most situations, and considering that teleport is just look at someone and press a button. I also hate this as a support who teaches people awful positioning, both the tanks that you work with and the supports that you are actually playing Kiriko with, because you can position anywhere you want as Kiriko and not get punished because you have the smallest hitbox in the game, kunai bullshit to rely on if things go south, and you've got two buttons that take 0 skill that are both get out of jail free cards where you just press the button and now you don't die. So yeah, I fucking hate Kiriko. She's the only support in the game that I hate. I hate playing her, I hate playing against her, and not only do I hate her, but I genuinely think, if we're talking average level play, Kiriko is one of the most brain dead characters in the game. Because yes, kunais take skill, but what else does? And consider that kunais, similarly to Hanzo arrows, a lot of the time are more luck than skill. I struggle to buy it when people tell me, like, oh, you know, Kiriko's a really high skill support, she's got to land those headshots, especially considering that, while if we're talking high level coordinated play, like Overwatch League level play, obviously teleporting on an invisible Sombra as Kiriko and going for flanks actually is a high skill aspect of Kiriko's kit, which is kind of difficult. That's not actually the optimal playstyle for ladder most of the time. If you're playing with randoms on ladder, the best way to play Kiriko is to heal bot and just occasionally throw a kunai out when you've got nothing better to do. Because her ultimate Kitsune Rush is probably the strongest part about her, and Kitsune Rush, well, if you want to farm ult charge, you're going to have to just heal bot your tank. So, yeah. I am not a fan of Kiriko, man. So yeah, I genuinely stick by this. This isn't just a I don't like Kiriko placement. This is genuinely, I really do think the only part about Kiriko that takes skill is kunais, and even then, most of the time it's luck. And only for the highest of high-level players can they really say that they're consistently landing kunai headshots because they're actually good at aiming kunais and not just because they're getting lucky and spamming them at head height down a doorway that they expect people to come from. So yeah, I think that's fair enough. And I think that Kiriko is also probably the only support in the game who basically never gets punished for her positioning because she has so many skillless get-out-of-jail-free cards. Lifeweaver. Oh man, what do I do with Lifeweaver? God fucking damn it. I just realized how hard Lifeweaver is. Okay, here's the thing. There's a lot of skill that goes underappreciated in Lifeweaver's kit. But I also think the buffs they gave him kind of reduce the importance of actually having those skills. Shit, you know what? Man, this hurts. Okay, I love Lifeweaver, but I think I've got to put him here, man. Okay, here's the thing. Pre-buff Lifeweaver, I think, was actually, like, all the way up here. Because you could still make him work then, but you had to use big brain life grips to make him worthwhile. You had to play him on the right maps, you had to have really good positioning, and you had to make sure you kept extremely low deaths with him for him to be worthwhile. But now he's been buffed so much, you can kind of just heal bot on Lifeweaver with just average positioning and only really use life grip to save people when they're about to die rather than to actually put them in better positions or actually use it aggressively to maybe pull the tank onto enemy high ground like I used to do with him. You don't really have to make any big brain plays to do well with him now. You kind of just heal bot. You see, okay, I might make a separate video on this at some time, but I kind of don't like the way they buff Lifeweaver. While I am glad that Lifeweaver is better now, and I do think he needed buffs, the way they went about it, I feel made him boring. I feel like Lifeweaver now is a character that mostly heal bots and doesn't really get value out of the fact that they can provide positioning like advantages, but rather they usually get value just because they have an ultimate which charges really fast, and as long as you have tree, you basically can't kill your team is nearly unkillable if there's a tree. So the fact you can charge tree super fast by heal botting, the fact that it's easy to heal bot with Lifeweaver, and the fact that you charge ultimate really fast by heal botting and having ult means that you just never die in team fights, means that Lifeweaver is just a really effective support for like just making it so your team doesn't die, that there's just a wall of HP that the enemies can't get through. And I'm not a fan of that, honestly, because I do think, like, I really want to put him higher. I really want to tell you about how, oh, but really you underappreciate the fact that you can use petals to get to this area and then life grip your tank aggressively, not just defensively, and put them into better spots, and put them in positions where they can get easy kills unexpectedly in ways that no other support could do. And you also need to learn extremely good positioning and be ready to have multiple escape routes in mind, and so that you can keep your low deaths on Lifeweaver. But at the end of the day, while I'm saying all this, and yes, if you want to play him optimally, you have to do that. At the end of the day, you get so much value just by farming ult with Lifeweaver. And I think that's why I said recently that he feels weird ever since he's been buffed, and he almost feels worse even though he's technically better. I think he's felt worse to me even though he's technically better, and I do quote-unquote better with him now he's buffed, because I used to before tell myself, if I have a game with Lifeweaver where I just heal bot and I don't get any good platforms, I don't get any good life grips, I just heal bot and that's all I do, then that was not a good game, even if we win. Because that means that I didn't get any value by picking Lifeweaver. I would have done more on Mercy than Lifeweaver, because I could have done the same amount of healing on Mercy, and I also could have done it while also providing damage boost and res. Whereas on Lifeweaver, I provide the healing and I don't provide anything else. So I program myself to think like that, but honestly, now that's not even really the case. Now the amount of healing that Lifeweaver puts out, combined with how powerful his ultimate is after the buffs, combined with how fast it charges, means that Lifeweaver does have value over Mercy. Mercy has the worst support ultimate in the game by a mile, whereas Lifeweaver doesn't, and his charges really fast. So as long as you get enough trees of life, honestly, you don't really have to think that much. Oh god, that hurts. I really don't think... Yeah, I really don't like putting Lifeweaver here, but... Lucio. Oh boy. I have no idea if this is going to be a popular or unpopular opinion, honestly. I think Lucio's Gigabrain. I think that Lucio is probably the single most difficult support in the game, and I feel like that shouldn't be all that shocking, but I think that some people might be shocked to hear that. So why is Lucio the most difficult support in the game, in my opinion? I think he just basically tests essentially all of your skills in this game. Lucio is extremely difficult to aim on. His shots are slow-moving projectiles which take a long time to reach their target, and as a result, it's really difficult to do good damage on Lucio unless you're landing consistent headshots, but landing headshots is difficult because you have to hard predict movements to do it. So already, it's difficult to aim with Lucio, but on top of that, it's also really difficult to move with Lucio and position yourself well. He's got extremely intricate movement that takes a lot of years of play to really master and abuse to its fullest extent. But then on top of that, you also have to consider more abstract things, more strategic things. Because, like I mentioned back when I said Junker Queen, speed is a weird thing that's very volatile in Overwatch. Sometimes it's the best thing in the world, and sometimes it's worthless. And so you really have to be very aware of whether you want to be using speed or heal right now as Lucio at all times, and that's very difficult when you have to keep track of all the people who are getting your speed and healing and, you know, actually consider, is this helping or not? It's also difficult to constantly keep moving around using wall riding, while also keep staying in the area that you need to be in to give the teammates the benefit that they need, whether it be speed or healing. You can't really stand still and make yourself an easy target as Lucio, so you have to keep moving, but if the place that you need to be to give everyone the boost they need is stationary, then the fact that you need to keep moving actually kind of becomes a downside. You have to find ways to keep constantly moving while staying around the same area to keep giving your teammates the benefit they need. As well as that, the Lucio has to coordinate with the tank, and to be fair, maybe part of the reason I think that Lucio is this difficult is because I usually play solo queue and I'm usually not coming with my tank. But Jesus Christ, it is difficult to try and read the mind of your tank if you're playing with, like, a silent random, and it's like, the amount of games I played on Lucio with like a silent Reinhardt who like I've got no communication with, and I'm sitting there trying to read their mind, guess whether they want to go in or go out, and constantly have to play around what they want to do when I have no idea what they're doing. That's really, really difficult. It's really, really hard to know what they want, but I do think it's something I've gotten better at over time. On top of that, Boop is also another ability I would consider relatively big brain in my opinion. While it's not the most deep ability in the game, I feel like Boop is extremely worthless if you just use it for damage, which in fairness I do a little bit too much. When you actually use it for creative purposes and displacement, it becomes far more effective, but that means to get the effectiveness you want out of it, you really have to get creative. So considering Lucio is a character that demands of you extremely good aim, extremely good movement mechanics, and extremely good mind games when it comes to using Boop effectively for displacement, using speed and healing effectively at the right places at the right times, and having the good positioning to, while still keeping moving around at the right times, coordinate with your team and give them the benefits they want at the times they want. This is a character that for the most part, in my opinion, tests your every skill to a pretty strong extent. The only parts of Lucio's kit which I consider easy to use are for the most part his ultimate, because you mostly use it to negate other ultimates or to engage when people are starting to get low, and his healing, because yeah, you do just kind of put on the healing song and it does it for you. But I mean, most supports have easy healing, and his ultimate, while it is generally easy to use, I do think sometimes the use cases can get quite convoluted, especially when you consider the fact that as a character that's constantly having to zip around and never stand still, and constantly your movement is restricted to where you can go by wall riding, you have to keep in mind, okay, where do I want to use my ultimate to make sure that all my teammates get the benefit in time? Hell, even the fact that you have to wall ride to get around means that you're more likely to be in the air when you want to use his ultimate, which means there's going to be a longer delay between you pressing the button and it going off. And a lot of the time, if you're going to keep wall riding around, you're going to naturally get a little bit higher and further up into the air, which means that the longer you go around wall riding, not touching the ground, the longer it'll be before the ultimate actually triggers, and the more time you're giving to the enemies to cancel it, or cause something catastrophic to happen just before it hits. So I think for the most part, Lucio is a character that requires a good amount of strategy while also testing both your movement and aim mechanics pretty severely, so I think he's worthy of being high up on the list. I'm just realizing now I got more than I thought I would in the tops tier, but we'll see if that changes.